Hello, and welcome back to the Self-Service Podcast. So good to have you back, and we've got such an exciting episode today. I am joined by the amazing Kate Malcolm, host of the New to Canada podcast, founder of the Newcomer collective, and not to mention one of my best friends in the world. So welcome, Kate, and good to see you.
I'm so happy to be here. I was just saying that I feel like I'm your number one fan already. I listen every week. You're doing such a great job. And yeah, I love it. I've got a morning off with the baby and got makeup on at 10 o'clock in the morning. And I'm feeling it, chatting with one of my best friends.
You look amazing. And to be fair, I've been really nervous about this because you have been podcasting for a few years now. And I'm just like, oh no, I hope that I'm doing it right. But
I know, I remember those beginning days as well, but yeah, it's going so good. I love it.
Thank you. Well, today, to no surprise, I really wanted us to talk about living abroad. We've both done that and have had completely different experiences, which is why I really wanted to get you on the show. As you know, you guys know from listening so far, I used to live in Australia and I've been back in the UK for 2 years. So for me personally, it didn't quite work out. But Kate, you have such an amazing story and have done some incredible things to help yourself and thousands of other people in moving abroad and doing what is such a scary, nerve-wracking thing. So I think the best place to start is, Kate, could you tell us a bit about your story and how you even ended up living in Canada?
Yes. Well, that could be a whole episode, but I'll give you the short version. Yeah, basically, Canada was never on my radar. Moving abroad was never on my radar. It wasn't in my plan at all. It just shows how you just never know where life's going to take you. I'm the poster child for that because, yeah, basically, we lived together. When was that? Back in 2016. And I decided to go backpacking, Southeast Asia. You know, a lot of people do, you know, touring around Thailand and Bali and all the places. And yeah, while I was there, I met a Canadian, a dashing blonde tan Canadian. I was like, damn it, there goes my independent, you know, backpacking, you know, a strong independent woman thing. So yeah, I instantly clicked with him. And yeah, we just kind of decided to keep traveling together, really. And then we lived in Australia for a year, and then we ran out of money and we had to decide to be adults eventually. And so we had to decide, you know, England or Canada, I guess. And yeah, I just wasn't ready to go back to England. I'd never been to Canada, and I thought, oh, just continue the adventure with this guy that I've met, and see where it goes. So moved to Canada with him. And yeah, now we're married and we've just had our first baby. So yeah.
Wow, that was a really like whistle stop tour of like the last, God, has it been 7 years since you left? Yeah, because just for context for you guys, Kate and I, we both lived together in Bournemouth, and I remember you working at like a hotel down in Poole, and you're working in events and you were sort of creating other people's weddings, and I just remember you were like, yeah, there's something else for me out there, and you took this really big leap. And I think a lot of people can resonate with the fact of really starting something like leaving to go traveling without a plan. And that's exactly what you did, right? You didn't really have a plan.
No, and I was doing that thing where you try and ask your friends, like, oh, you want to go to Bangkok with me? Let's do it. I don't want. And then, you know, it never works out. Your one friend is like, okay, I'm coming. And then they're like, oh, no, sorry. Like, I've got this new job and I can't come anymore. So I just gave up waiting for a crutch, really. And I just thought, no, I'm just going to go by myself and figure it out as I go. Because if I don't go now, I remember telling myself that I'm just never going to go, because then you're just going to get a promotion and you're going to get this other job opportunity and then you're going to buy a house, and I'm never going to get this chance again where I could just quit and not have that many responsibilities to leave behind at this age. So I just thought, screw it, I'm going.
Oh, I love that. And I love that message. It's something that I feel like so passionate about, of, you know, we kind of get so caught up in that we need to do things by a certain age and putting things off. But sometimes you have really got to like bite the bullet and just like go with it, haven't you? And see what happens, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't know what's going to happen, clearly.
Yeah, so obviously you went from traveling, doing the backpacker thing, which, you know, I think we can we can say is probably like the most exciting part. You're so sort of like carefree and just going from place to place. How did you
Yeah.
find that shift when you actually were like, okay, I'm moving to Canada for this guy, and this is now going to be me living like a normal life, right?
Yeah, it definitely was a shift. And I think it helped that we lived in Australia for a bit before as well. But again, it's a completely different feeling, because I knew that that was only temporary as well. Like when you go to these countries and you think, oh, I'm never going to live here forever, so there's always an end date. So I loved, in a previous episode you were talking about how yeah, if you don't have that end date, so then you don't actually plan and get advance in your life, because you're just that you're not going to set. I can't even remember what you said, but it was so good. But that shifted, yeah, when I came back, when I went to Canada, because yeah, I knew that this was going to be much more permanent, which again, I always say now that was kind of shooting myself in the foot, because nothing is permanent. I say to people all the time now, oh, I'm panicking and nothing's going right and I can't find the job of my dreams in this country and blah blah blah. Nothing actually is permanent. It just feels that way. And yeah, when I first came to Canada, I started panicking about all the things. We'll get into it, but yeah, it was definitely a different feeling for sure.
Yeah, and it's that also that feeling of like, oh, even though we know and we try and live by that, things aren't permanent, we do kind of feel like the decisions are really final, and like, oh, okay, am I sort of saying goodbye to my home country by doing this? And it's so scary. Let's sort of talk about your sort of early experiences when you moved to Canada. Maybe perhaps some of the challenges and things that you felt that were maybe hard.
Yeah, so I think because I was much more aware of that I had to build this new life for myself, that it was going to be a long time that I was going to be here, and I had to set foundations down and find real friends, and build a career that I really loved and was fulfilled in. That just came with so much pressure. And yeah, it's so crazy to look back at it, because I put so much pressure on myself and all these crazy deadlines. And I think a lot of people that move to a new country do this, where you say, okay, well, I'm failing at this because I haven't got a job that I love and I've been here 6 months, or I'm failing, I should go back home because I haven't found any friends in the first few weeks. And it's, what are these deadlines? What is this timeline that we're trying to strive towards? It just doesn't make any sense. Everyone's timeline is so different, and these things that we're trying to achieve, they take so much time, and we don't give ourselves enough time to do it, and we're not patient enough in the process, really, because you see online all of these dream worlds and dream lives that people have built for themselves abroad, and you think that you should be achieving all these things super quick. And yeah, I always used to tell myself, Alex and Rosie and all my friends from England, these are friendships that I built over years and years and years. So why am I expecting to find those friendships within, a couple weeks, a couple months? It just doesn't make any sense. But that's definitely something I struggled with at the beginning. I held myself, up to such a high standard and so much pressure to just build this life instantly that was successful. And it just took a lot longer than I thought. And then all the emotions that come with that you're failing, that you're not, it's not going to work out, you're never going to fit in, all of these crazy thoughts come in. But yeah, it's definitely a lot harder for a lot longer than a lot of people realize.
Yeah, I really resonate with that feeling of pressure. And like you say, I think you're also looking at what everyone else is doing, like all your friends back home, and looking at them maybe taking a different path and wondering, oh, I can see they've, I don't know, bought their first house, or like you say, they're in their job, or they're all hanging out together, and you kind of feel like you're missing out, right? Even though in their eyes, they're looking at you thinking you're living the dream. And don't you think that's like the biggest thing? You kind of, and obviously social media only shows us the highlights, but also I think friends from a different country, like that's also not easy, right? And what did you do to build friends, and have you got any sort of memories from when you first started those friendships that you could share?
Yeah, so this is such a crazy topic, isn't it? Because when you say oh, I need to make friends, and oh, I need to find people to be my friend. It just sounds just so embarrassing. There's a real cringe to it. And I've had people on my podcast before, and I had this one guy from New Zealand come on, and the topic was, making friends abroad. But he didn't want me to make the title of the episode that, because he was like, oh, all my friends are going to make fun of me for like talking about how to make friends. And it's just so strange how embarrassed we feel about that. So yeah, I think at the beginning, I personally really struggled with feeling different, which is something I never really thought I would struggle with. I'd been traveling, I'd lived in Australia, but I think in those settings, I'd always been with a bunch of other people from all different countries. So it wasn't really an anomaly. But when I moved to Canada, I live in rural Ontario. So there's lakes and forests, and the nearest city in Toronto is a couple hours drive away. So if I lived in Toronto, there'd be a bunch of people from all different countries. But where I am, it's very Canadian. I'm the only British person that I talk to that I know. So I'll probably listen back to this episode and hear all of my Canadian twangs and words that I say now, but I'm not doing it on purpose. I'm just literally surrounded by Canadians 24/7. But yeah, when I first came here, I was just really aware of being different. And when you move to North America, especially, they have this obsession with the British accent, which I just wasn't prepared for. Every time I open my mouth, if I go into a store, if I go, anywhere, they think, oh my God, your accent. Oh, I love it. Are you from Australia? Are you from England? They just don't know. And that really shocked me at the beginning. It made me kind of uncomfortable. I didn't want to just be constantly reminded of not belonging and not being from this place. And I'm trying to fit in. I don't want you to always remind me that I'm different. And yeah, I think a lot of people that move here from England, that doesn't bother them. But for me, it just got on my nerves after, every single time you're trying to make a friendship with someone, it's like, did you even listen to what I just said? Or you're just focusing on my accent? So that was a really unexpected challenge at the beginning.
Was there any like certain words or things that you said that they were just like couldn't understand?
Oh my God. So the funniest story I have from the beginning was when we went to a restaurant. I think it was like my first week in Canada, and I was with all these Canadians at the table, and they were all ordering drinks. So they were ordering, Cokes, lemonades, whatever. And it got to me, and I just said, oh, I'm just going to have a water, please. And the way that we say water, obviously, is nothing like the way that they say. They're like water, right? So and she kind of looked at me. She was like, okay. And she walked off. And then the Canadians at the table, they said, yeah, I don't think she got that. Like, I don't know. So she wandered off. And then, 5-10 minutes later, she came back with everyone's drinks. And I'm not kidding you, she put a plate of butter in front of me, Alex.
Butter.
A plate of butter. There was no bread on the table. Everyone was just getting drinks, and everyone just roared with laughter. They were like, are you kidding me? Like, what do you think she meant? Water, butter? Like, that's
hilarious. I mean, like, I love butter, but I think that would also be like just such a weird moment, like as if they didn't sort of think, yeah, she probably doesn't want this.
Yeah, maybe some bread as well. I don't know. Yeah. And then my husband, my boyfriend at the time, he was like, what, you get a lot of orders of butter? Like, what are you doing? What is happening? Like, so yeah, I always struggle with the T words. So water, tomato, well, they say tomato as well. Those kind of words, we really pronounce the T anyway, where I'm from, in the posh, horrible accent part. Drive-throughs, if I go through a drive-through and I want like a tomato on my bagel, I have to make sure I say tomato, and like I want a water, or I like wait for someone to order the waters, and I'm like, me too. That's usually my go-to now.
That's brilliant. And it's funny because when I have seen you and we've caught up, like there are things that you say that I noticed that are a bit Canadian, and obviously like you've had to adapt, haven't you, to sort of build those connections as well. You sort of have to adapted without even sort of realizing it, I bet.
Because there's a certain number of times where you can say garage and then everyone laugh at you, and then it's just like, look, I'm just going to start saying garage, because it's just, you can't just keep being laughed at your whole life. You have to just adapt and say garage. I hate garage, but I definitely say garage now.
I bet it'll be interesting to have seen you right at the beginning when you first got there compared to what you're like now.
Yeah,
But yeah,
I
we've
think
talked
so.
about connections, and I feel like building connections has got to be one of the most important parts of feeling settled when you live abroad. Because I know when I was in Australia, I was, living in these beautiful places, and there was sort of this real pressure of like, oh, I really should be grateful for this because I can go and chill by my swimming pool on a Sunday afternoon, or I can go down to the beach. But what I realized was towards the end of me being there was that actually connections were really important for me. And without them, those sort of like amazing things didn't really mean anything.
Yeah.
And you've also had Isaac's sort of family there, right? And he's got a really big family. How important has it been to have connections, and what have you done to sort of maintain that and really build on that over the last few years?
Yeah, connection is the most important thing when you move to a new country, because you have completely lost your support network from home. You've completely lost your home comforts, just the sense of familiarity around yourself. You hear your accent around you when you go to a shop. And so you've just been stripped of absolutely everything. And you need to rebuild everything from scratch. And again, going back to what I was saying, we just don't give ourselves enough credit for how long that process is going to take, and how hard it is, how tough it is. And you need that support around you. And that is, aside from all the logistics that you have to do, you have to open a bank account, you have to find a place to live, you have to build your career. But at the end of the day, I think, yeah, you're so right that the connections are essential for finding happiness, for building a life that you're happy and settled. And yeah, it's so important. So I think, yeah, I definitely had a little bit of a head start. I can't even imagine I meet so many newcomers now with what I do that move to Canada, and, English is their second language. So you've got that added level of challenge there. You don't speak the language. You're from a completely different culture. So for me, Canadians, yeah, they watch the same movies, they listen to the same music. The culture aspect there is quite similar between Canada and the UK. So yeah, I cannot even imagine coming from, some of these countries that, these people I talk to, I'm lucky enough to talk to, they are really coming in and having to build connections from such a different place to me. But yeah, Isaac's family was so welcoming. I had that as a head start. He's got a huge family. They welcomed me. He had all his friends from school welcome me. So yeah, but then with that came a different level of struggle for me, because after about a year or two, I looked around at my life, and I realized that everyone in my life was just his friends and his family. And I loved them all dearly. Of course, like they're still, my closest friends are probably still those same people, but you want something for yourself too. I wanted to go out and make my own friends and my own connections and have something of my own. So that was a whole weird, different challenge I had to do. But yeah, I mean, events were huge. I'm from an events background anyway, but I really tapped into that. I drove into Toronto. I did whatever I had to do to make connections. And yeah, websites like meetup.com, eventbrite.com, Facebook groups were huge for me. They are packed with expats in Toronto or Brits in Canada. You can Google those Facebook groups and find them. Those are the kind of things I did at the beginning to try and meet people. But that was a lot.
Yeah, and it's about no, it's great. And it's about finding those people that are kind of on your same wavelength, right? Because it's great to have your partner there and their family and have that support network, but they're never going to be able to understand exactly what you're going through. And
Yeah.
I imagine, finding those places where people are just like you, other expats, it makes such a difference. And I know that when I felt lonely, even like you said, just joining a Facebook group where other people were talking about the same thing, it is huge for that. And you can kind of share in those negative feelings as well.
You definitely have to be careful. I think something I've learned from interviewing all these newcomers on my podcast, it comes up again and again, where it's such a delicate balance between only hanging out with people from your home country and trying to make connections with Canadians, with the people that grew up and that live in the country that you're trying to adapt to. You're trying to integrate into that culture and build a life in that country. So if you're only hanging out with British people, or if you're only hanging out with people from your home country, yeah, there's so many benefits to that you're gonna be able to have that connection to your home and share that experience with them. But at the same time, you see communities popping up in Canada where they don't even speak English, because they're just, in their little Italies, or, they're in their Indian communities in Toronto. And so that's a bit of a danger there as well. But yeah,
that's
hard.
a really good point. I've not really thought of that. But yeah, I remember when I got my first job with all Australian people, because the first 2 years I worked with just British people, and when I then got a job for I was the only English person there, it felt so different. But
Like a
I
different
knew
country.
that I knew that I had to make the effort and sort of to understand them and for them to understand me. But yeah, it's I can see how that's important to really fully integrate. And how has obviously Isaac's been a big support for you. How has he how has he supported you along the way, and how difficult has that been? I know that I had feelings along the way of sometimes you don't understand where I'm coming from, and that can be quite difficult, particularly when you're feeling really, really homesick, which is, probably the biggest part of living abroad that I think we struggle with. How has that been a support for you?
Yeah, it is really hard, because especially in my situation, I was just joining his life. So he had the absolute best case scenario for himself. He had his life, his family, his job, and he just plunked me in it. And I was just in his life, and everything for me was so different, and everything for him was just everything he'd ever known. So whenever I clashed with something, or I was getting frustrated with something about Canada, or if I was struggling with making friends, or hating how people were mocking my accent, or all these little things, it's really hard for him to understand where I was coming from, definitely. And yeah, I think the biggest thing for us right now is whenever I start to feel homesick, and I say this all the time, you're always going to get homesick. This isn't something you're ever going to cure. You're never going to wake up one day and 100% just love your new life in this new country and never think about home. It's always going to be there. And I just think for us, what helps is that I just always have a trip booked. I always know when I'm next going home. I always know when I'm next going to see my loved ones and my family, and he supports that. So it's just a huge financial chunk that we have to set aside for that. But for him to understand that and have that as part of the deal. Unfortunately, you've married someone that's not from here, and we have to kind of dedicate that for me to go home. And yeah, I think he's just been really supportive with just being patient with me. You go through such bad days and really emotional days. I've said horrible things about Canada and Canadian people, and you just lash out, and he's just been so patient, really, in the grand scheme of things. And it's just process.
That's amazing. And has there ever been any doubts along this journey? Have you ever had those moments where you think, I'm going to throw the towel in, I'm going to go home?
Oh, all the time. All the time. And I don't think that's anything to be ashamed of. Again, I think it's so normal. I think everyone has those moments. You're never just going to move to a new country. Although, I have spoken to some people where it has all just clicked and they love it. And that's fantastic too. So I would never want to just, say that's strange if everything falls into place. That's amazing. But I genuinely believe the majority of people that move to a new country, they're going to regret it at some point. They're going to completely doubt their decision. They're going to doubt themselves and whether they can do it. They're going to want to throw the towel in, like you said. And I definitely had a lot of those moments. And I would say it took at least 2 years, 3 years even, for me to not regularly feel like that. Now I feel like that maybe once or twice a year, not even. And at the beginning, for the first 2-3 years, I was feeling that every week. So it's an intense thing that we have to go through. And I think, the biggest memory I have of that was when I had gone back to England and I was in my parents' spare bedroom and I was packing my suitcase because my flight back to Canada was the following day. And I was just crying while I was packing my suitcase. I was just throwing my clothes in, bawling my eyes out. My mum walked in, she sat on the bed with me, and I can't even imagine what that was like as a parent, because there's nothing she can do about it either. She's, you've decided to live there, you've fallen in love with this guy, and it's so hard to be torn. That's how I always described it. Like, you're just torn between two places, because I loved Canada. I love living there. I love my life with him. What's the alternative? I'm going to, not be with the guy I love and move back to England and be miserable in England. So you just feel so torn and so helpless. There's no right decision. So that was a hard time for me at the beginning, but it definitely has got a lot better now.
Yeah, and it's a journey, right? And it does change. But I think it's really kind of, in a way, it's quite nice to hear that, even though, this has worked out for you in the fact that you have really settled in Canada, you've got your husband and your baby now. It's really, I think, for other people listening that are living abroad right now and perhaps struggling, I think it could be really quite important for them to hear that the homesickness is okay, and it doesn't mean that you should go home, but it's actually important to feel that, and that you will feel that, and the doubt does, can sometimes creep in. You mentioned your family just then. I wondered, did you ever feel guilty about not being at home? Because I know for me that was probably one of the biggest things that I found really, really hard to deal with.
Yes, definitely. But I think the guilt that I felt is nothing compared to what I feel now that I have a baby. That is just the next level of it. That's just tripled any guilt that I ever had before, because now it's not only me that I'm depriving them of, because I'm so wonderful, but I'm not depriving them of just me. I'm depriving them of their first grandbaby, and this little baby in the family is never, going to experience England like I ever did, never going to connect to England as well as I did, not going to get to know my brother, Uncle Tom, all these thoughts creep in your head as a new mom. And that's been really hard, the guilt around that. So yeah, again, you just have to get through it. It's part of the decision that you've made. There's going to be ups and downs, positives and negatives, and you're never going to find it's never just going to be a perfect life when you have different countries involved. There's pros and cons. It's just part of it, unfortunately.
And do you think it's about accepting that, realizing that it's never going to be perfect, and actually life isn't? And, is it about just accepting, like, okay, yeah, with this decision there will come compromises, but like you said, what's the alternative?
Yeah. And I think as well, a trap that we fall into is that we paint this amazing life that we're missing out on. I always used to do it. I thought, oh my God, my best friends are living together and they're like going out every night, and I'm missing out on that. And then my family, that if I had my baby there, they'd be around every day helping me and making me dinners, and life wouldn't be like that. And I think that's a really important reminder for anyone that lives abroad as well, is that when you go home and you visit home, it's a whirlwind of so many meetups and dinners and catch-ups and cuddles with your parents, and that's just not what your life would be like. If you move back to England, you'd have bills to pay, you'd pay taxes, you'd go to work every day, you'd crash out in the night, you wouldn't see your friends every single day and your parents every single day. So that's a really important reminder as well, because our brain does play that grass is greener thing a lot. And comparison is such a killer when you live abroad. You just compare the new life, and you think that you're missing out on all these other things, when it might not necessarily be that you're missing out on all of that anyway. So
Yeah, God, I really get that. Because, you know, of course, when you come back to your home country and you're back for a week or two, like you pack so much in and everyone wants to see you,
Yeah.
of course, because it's the only chance that year that they're going to see you. But you can get so caught up in that, can't you? Like, I remember the amount of times I flew back to Australia, like crying my eyes out because I was just like, oh my God,
Mm,
like that was the best, like all my friends all together. But, you know,
yeah.
that isn't the reality. And I think it's just like reminding yourself of those things, isn't it? And
Yeah.
trying to keep that perspective. Um, so yeah, we've talked about some of the challenges. What have been some real like memorable moments over the last few years?
Oh my gosh. I would definitely say my wedding. I dragged all the Canadians over to England because I thought that's the least I can do for my parents, right? I've like moved to the other side of the world and I'm going to start my family away from them. So the least I can do is have this big wedding and have everyone in my family be able to attend. So yeah, it was amazing. You were my bridesmaid. I had 3 English bridesmaids, 3 Canadian bridesmaids. So that in itself was just so crazy. Like my 2 worlds completely collided. Looking out, you know, when I had that ceremony and I looked out and it was just a mismatch of all my Canadian favorites and all my English favorites just all together. It was so bizarre. Like my, you know, Isaac's best friend from school was talking to my brother. I was like, what is going on? So yeah, that was amazing. And yeah, that was the moment where I thought, wow, this is actually an amazing life that I've built and all these people are in my life. I'm so lucky. Yeah, it was really good.
That was
Yeah.
actually one of the best days ever. And for us as well, to see you so happy and to see how your worlds have collided and to see Isaac and all of his family, you know, and friends, the people that you've talked to us about on FaceTime, but to
Yeah.
actually connect with them face to face. And I think us having, you know, 3 of us bridesmaids being the English ones and the 3 Canadian girls, like, and just knowing that it was you that brought us together and that we were all kind of your friend in the exact same way. It was amazing. And I think that really helped us too, actually, to be like, okay,
Oh,
we know that you're
she's good.
okay and you're being looked after. She's good. And we're just so proud of you as well, because I know how hard it can be taking this step in this journey, and you've come so far, and I'm just like so happy about how things have turned out for you.
Aw. Yeah, thank you. It was such a good day. And I think it was such an amazing moment too, because I think a lot of people who move abroad will relate that you have completely separated the 2 countries and the 2 lives. Like you said, you go back to England and you just feel like a completely different person and complete different life. And then you go to Canada or Australia or wherever, and it's a complete different life again. So that moment where it was actually, no, this is actually one life that I have, and I just have these 2 amazing countries, these 2 amazing homes. I'm so lucky that I have 2 homes that I love and that, you know, I have passports for, and these people that love me in both countries. So it was actually a really big shifting point for me, I think, that I realized that it's not separate. You know, I don't have to choose between the 2. That comes with the guilt as well. You have to choose, you know, which is your home. No, you can have 2 homes and you can have all these people in your life, and yeah, it doesn't have to be separate. So it was amazing.
Yeah, and I think there is also about gratitude, like what it can you be grateful for,
Mm,
and thinking about that. And also, I'll never forget that you sent me a book once for Christmas called Home is Where the Heart Is, and I really believe in that. And when you just said there about having 2 homes, I think I absolutely agree, and that mindset can just be so helpful, can't it? So
it can. Was it called At Home Anywhere?
I was at home anywhere. Maybe it was at
Yeah,
home anywhere.
it's
Yes,
At
that
Home
was
Anywhere.
it.
She's just
At
released her
home
second
anywhere.
edition too. So she just released her second edition of that. It's an amazing book, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely
Yeah.
recommend that for anyone that's listening who's living abroad. Also, you mentioned sort of work earlier, and I know that's a real like big part of this. And you've been on such a journey with trying to find your way and your career. Yeah, can you talk to us about how that felt, and how did you sort of, what were the struggles along finding your work, and where has that led you?
Yeah, so my career has been a journey.
Yeah.
I Like you mentioned at the beginning, I used to be in events. I was an event manager at a hotel. So if you went back in time and told me then that I'm going to be, a content creator, podcast host, working with international people, international schools, and it's just worlds and worlds away from what I was doing. Um, and it's because I quickly realized when I moved here that you can't just replicate your career. And I think that's what a lot of people try and do. They move abroad and they think, right, so I'm sales, whatever in England. So now I need to find that exact job role, that exact job title, try and replicate everything about it. And it's often not possible. For me, I was based in big, venues, hotels, and there was nothing like that around where I was now living. I'm in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of cows, and I'd have to commute into Toronto if I wanted to have a job like that. So I quickly realized that commuting 3-4 hours a day just wasn't what I wanted to do. So yeah, you have to kind of sit back and think, right, I'm going to have to completely pivot everything I've known in my career. What other talents do I have? What am I interested in? What companies are out there that I might be interested in? What industries? So there's a lot of work that you have to do, I think, if you discover that your career can't be replicated, and that's a real challenge. So yeah, that's what happened to me. So I knew straight away I couldn't do event management. So I decided to start hosting my own events because, working at a venue just wasn't possible for me. So I thought, what better way to put my own name out there, to build my experience up. Canadian work experience is a term you hear a lot when you move to Canada. They're always looking for Canadian work experience, and you think, well, I just moved here, I don't have any Canadian work experience. So I always try and encourage people to start building your own portfolio, and how can you start creating your own content around the industry that you're interested in, posting on LinkedIn, and building that reputation for yourself, not just relying on finding a job, and start building yourself out that way. So that's what I did. I started hosting little events and posting about them and connecting with a lot of people because I was doing that. And then I've kind of fallen into what I do now, really. Again, I didn't really plan it. It's just, I think when you move abroad, you've just got to be so open to whatever is going to come to you, and connecting with everyone and seeing what opportunities come to you, really.
And again, I think you've just touched on the big kind of theme throughout all of this is connections. It's about building that network so that you've got connections, not only as friendships and relationships, but in the work that you want to do, and professionally, that those networks. And that's led you to what you do now. And I feel like you've gone through this journey which has now led you to helping others, with your podcast and your whole the Newcomer collective platform, where people can get the best sort of advice and tips on how to start a new life. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, I love it. I can't be more happy with how my career has ended up, because being in a hotel and doing events and getting paid pretty much minimum wage, it was great. I loved it. But now I have a career that is so fulfilling, and I don't think I would ever have stumbled into what I do now if I'd stayed in England. So it's so scary when you first move to a new country and you're trying to build something from scratch. But it just, I feel like when you do move abroad, because you're starting from scratch, you're so much more flexible and resilient and open to all these other things that come your way. And I've loved it. I've loved what I do now. So I help other people that want to move to Canada, basically, because when I first moved here, as we've touched on, there are just so many challenges involved, and no one speaks about them. No one speaks openly about the struggles that come with moving abroad. And not only that, all the logistics, you can drown in these Facebook groups and webinars and blog posts about moving to Canada and how to do this and that. So I just wanted to consolidate everything and just have this one place that you can go to not only get all the information you need and get introduced to all the experts, but also just have a bunch of newcomers that are going through the same thing, and we can openly talk about it. You miss home today. Okay, how can we help? And yeah, I just started the podcast when the pandemic started because I couldn't do my events anymore. So I thought, how am I going to connect with other humans during this time and keep sharing their stories? And we have so many lessons to share. I know you've moved to Australia and you're sharing all of your lessons you learned, and there's so much that we can learn from each other. So I thought, right, I'm going to start interviewing people that move here, learn all about where they're from in the world and what it was like growing up in these countries, which is amazing as well. But then, yeah, what brought them to Canada and how they can pass on their advice to others. So yeah, that's what I do.
I think it's just the most amazing thing, like how you can turn what can be, such a hard experience sometimes, and to go through those challenges and feel, perhaps at those points where you feel like giving up, and you haven't, and you've actually transformed that into something that's so helpful. I wish that there was a version of you in Australia, but when I was there, but I did listen to your podcast and they really helped, because I think sometimes it's actually just listening to other people's stories that make a difference. There might not necessarily have to be the 101 of, right, you need to do this, because obviously all of our experiences are different, but just sharing stories and hearing others and feeling like, okay, I'm not alone in this, can be so huge, can't it?
And also what I've learned from the podcast as well is that everyone's struggles are so similar. You think someone from, Ghana, someone from India, someone from Denmark, everyone that moves to a new country has such similar struggles that they go through. And it's just crazy that you feel so alone when you're going through them, and you think you're so isolated and you're the only one struggling, and maybe you should just go home because it's not working out. But I guarantee, what we were saying before, everyone is struggling in some way. And I've seen so many patterns and recurring topics in all of my interviews about the struggles that people go through when they move abroad. And it's been such an unexpected thing that's come from doing this show as well, is that it's actually validated a lot of the emotions that we go through. And yeah, joined everyone from all countries, all cultures. It's such a universal thing that we all feel. So.
And you actually run like in-person meetups, right?
Yes, I do. Now that the pandemic is over, behind us, I started doing them again. Love them. I drive to Toronto, and yeah, we have groups of anywhere from 15 to 50 people turn up, and they're from all different countries. Canada is so multicultural. There's immigrants from all over the world, and we join up in Toronto and we meet and we chat and make connections. It's amazing. And this winter, I'm actually this is an exclusive. I haven't actually told anyone this yet, but I'm actually going to do winter excursions. So I'm going to ship people from the city into rural Ontario where I live, and they're going to actually have, frozen lake days, activities. And because you move to Canada and you're stuck in Toronto, you don't have a car, like that's maybe not the authentic Canadian experience that you thought when you Google Canada. So I wanted to take them ice fishing and take them ice skating, and gonna do events like that this winter. Keep me busy.
That is amazing. Is Isaac gonna come with you? Because I feel like he's gonna like love doing that.
Yeah, Isaac and his Canadian friends, there's not more an authentic Canadian experience than like having these Canadians teach you how to ice fish. My God. Yeah, good luck.
Wow, that's amazing. And how many people have you got coming to these events now?
Yeah, it varies. I think in the summer, obviously you have a big outdoor patio and you can fill it with all these people. And then in the winter in Canada, people tend to hibernate more. And there's a lot of less going on. So I always try and encourage people, please come, because yeah, everything shuts down, and you can, seasonal depression is a real thing in Canada. So yeah, I'm going to see. But yeah, usually the average I would say is about 20-30 people. So.
That's so incredible. That must feel almost like a pinch me moment when you see everyone coming together and like you've created that. And I suppose what you've done as well is you've gone out of your way to be like, okay, I don't have, like when you first moved to another country, you don't have that community yet. And, you do have to put yourself out there, don't you? And you do have to actually make the effort and to do that. And you've done that in such a big way. And as well as that sort of emotional connection and relating to each other on that level, What sort of resources and access do they get through the Newcomer Collective offering that you have, and what help can they find?
Yeah, so basically like I mentioned, I've just got absolutely everything you need to move to Canada. Um, so we're talking pre-arrival preparation. So everything you should be researching, all the online resources that you can already start diving into before you've even moved. I've partnered with immigration lawyers that can, tell you your best pathway to permanent residence if you want to do that. I talk about how to say goodbye to your family, how to support your children if you have them, shipping them across the world, all the things about pre-arrival. Then I dive into logistics. So opening a bank account, taxes, phone plans, all of that boring life admin stuff is all covered. Then we talk about building your career in Canada. So I have a career coach coming on board, and she runs through everything about, Canadian resume styles and what to put on your LinkedIn profile, how networking is huge in Canada and how you can do that. I have a psychologist, so we talk about all the emotional tools, kind of what we're talking about today, but way more in depth, the emotional roller coaster and how to have the right mindset going into the whole thing, set yourself up for success in that way. I have realtors talking about, buying a home in Canada. So it's all in there. And yeah, you get your community as well. So everyone that's taking the course can join the community and pose questions and support each other as well. So yeah.
Hey, that is so incredible. Oh my goodness.
It's what I wish I had, and like what you said when you went to Australia, you just want that one place. You're so sick of having to think like, what am I missing? There's such a fear of the unknown when you're going to a different country. I'm going to get there and I'm going to forget something and it's going to be terrible. And so just knowing that you've got it covered and you can ask people questions, and yeah.
Wow. And there's so much to think about, isn't there? But the fact that you've got that all in one place is amazing. And I can only imagine how sort of engaging and eloquent you are in sort of helping people and explaining all of those difficult things. So that is just so inspiring. I love it so much. So we've talked like quite a lot about sort of your journey, experiences, the highs and lows. If you were to perhaps give, say, as a summary, like your top 3 tips for maybe someone that's looking to move abroad, and then perhaps someone that's already living abroad and perhaps struggling, could you share with us your tips?
Yes. Okay. So for people that are about to move to a new country, I would say just don't get too bogged down with the preparation. I know that's what I was just talking about, but again, you can really drown in all these resources and panicking about things you should be doing, and just you can't control most of it. You're going to get there, things are going to happen, unexpected things are going to come your way, you're going to get career blocks in the road, you're going to struggle to meet new people, whatever it is, you're going to have challenges, and worrying about those ahead of time is really pointless. So I just say just dive into it. You've been dreaming about it, it's on your heart, you want to do it, and that's obviously means something. You should do it and just accept that it's a roller coaster. It's going to be up, it's going to be down, that's a part of it, and you've just got to, it's so cheesy, but you've got to like ride that roller coaster. It's part of the adventure, and yeah, don't stress about the bad things that could happen, for sure.
Love that.
And for people that are struggling after a move abroad, I think this whole episode is going to help you, but just knowing that you're not alone. Honestly, that's the one reason why I created this community for people that live in Canada. It's so easy to think that you're the only one struggling, but you have to just be patient with the process. It takes so much longer to build relationships and build a career and build a life from scratch. You've literally built it from nothing, and we don't give ourselves enough patience to do that. So if you're struggling, it's completely normal. It will get better. It does get easier. And if it doesn't get easier, nothing's permanent. You can always, go home, you can pivot, you can rethink things. Reflection's really important. So just sit down with how you're struggling, how you're feeling, what areas really are lacking that would make you feel better if you improved. It's not just going to miraculously get better. You have to do that work and think about what you can do to help yourself feel better, but it does get better. So
I'm really glad you touched on that actually, Kate, because for some people it isn't supposed to last forever, and that's also okay. And that's also a message that sort of I'm really conscious of getting out there. And leaving another country to come back home is, I think you think you're going to slot back in and it's really easy, and it's really difficult, but it's also okay that you've made that decision too. And I think it's like doing all of this work, no matter what the outcome, things will get better, as you said. So I'm really like glad that you touched on that as well. And I think that there's so many amazing nuggets of advice, tips, and hopefully by listening to this episode people will feel much less alone. And I've just really loved having you on here to share all your experiences and journey. And I know that it's still a journey that you're going on, which I think is important to reflect. And just thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, this has been wonderful. Thank you for having me. Come and visit me in Canada, please.
Yes. Kate, where can people find you as well? Because obviously you have a few ways of people having access to your socials and your network. So where can people find you?
Yeah, so it's the same across everything: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. It's the Newcomer Collective. So it's a collection of all the support you need. So yeah, the Newcomer Collective. Oh, and the podcast is New to Canada. So if you search New to Canada podcast, will come up. And even if you don't want to move to Canada, like we mentioned, there's stories from people from all different countries about what it was like growing up there. And if you're into traveling, hearing recommendations from people that were born there is really cool as well. So yeah, check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can vouch for that it's been so helpful, even listening to some of your podcasts. Even though I've not lived in Canada, there's so much that we can all relate to, no matter where we've moved to. So thank you so much, Kate. You've been amazing. And I'm sure we could cover so much more in another episode, but I really, really appreciate your time, and so good to see you. And hopefully see you in Canada next time.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I'll get you on ice fishing.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks everyone for listening to today's episode. Make sure you follow my podcast on whatever platform you're listening to, whether that's Spotify or Apple Music. Follow me on Instagram at the self-service_, and make sure you leave a review on this episode. Let us know what you think, what's helped, and what you might like to hear more of. So tune in next time and discover the power of self-service.